to a hybrid episode of Requel, the We Pitch movie series. This is where I pitch some type of movie idea, being a sequel, requel, prequel, midquel, sidequel, whatever you want to call it. I take a property and I pitch it. Sometimes I have a guest, sometimes I don't. And this is a hybrid because I'm doing it in the fashion of riding in the car with Bri and Ty. I'm pitching this while I drive because, the brain's working and it's a nice, quiet day. So here we go. Recently, Brian was over at the house and we were hanging out and we posed the question of what comedy has a really good sequel. And then we just kind of talked. When there's a few, we were able to get a few, but one that kept coming up was American Pie. So Brian was like, oh man, I haven't watched those in forever. So we ended up watching all 4 American Pie films. Now, I say 4 because I don't count those other spin-off as legit movies. I'm talking about American Pie, American Pie 2, American Wedding, and American Reunion. And then I got thinking, Brian and I were watching, I was like, why do I like these movies? And as we're watching these movies, Brian's making jokes about Jim's dad as me and young Jim as future Solomon, and we're laughing because I always thought Jim's dad was a great character. And to me, he brought such a different vibe and a heart to the films that's why I feel that they have a great message and longevity. And then we found a quiz online of which American Pie character are you? And we took it, and Brian was Kevin. No, Brian was Stifler, I think, and James was Kevin. I came out as Jim's dad. So that was pretty funny. And then as we went through it, and we ranked them on Letterboxd, and I said, my favorite would probably be Reunion, 1, 2, Wedding. And I was like, Wedding I think is just a movie that missed its mark in a couple areas. And Brian's like, really? And I was like, yeah, and we watched it. And I was like, Reunion's my favorite, but you can't get to Reunion without going through the series. And then I said, what would you do next? And this is my pitch. And the seeds have been planted throughout all 4 films. Is American Funeral. And it's the passing of Jim's dad. And as horrible as that is, you can't have a comedy set at a funeral. You think of the movies are about high school graduation and weddings, and another life event is a funeral. And Jim's dad has been such a linchpin held pivot for Jim in his entire life that now the absence of him represents a new chapter in Jim's life. You have the premise of Jim, because even in Reunion, we know that Jim's mom has passed. And Jim is trying to encourage his dad to get out and date. And there's a scene where Jim quotes some of the things his dad says to him back at his dad. And we see Jim's dad play the biggest role he ever had in American Reunion. So Jim is primed to grow up to follow in his father's footsteps. But we never really follow in our father's footsteps until our fathers are absent. We know that Jim has a son, and I'm not saying we set the son up to be the next Jim, but we get to see this full circle character evolution of Jim now being the father role. It can be Noah passes, Jim and his family move back, and they, move back into Jim's old house. And now Jim, just that moment of his bedroom's his father's old bedroom. Jim's son, Evan, moves into Jim's room, and hijinks occur, and that's the fun of the series. The awkwardness of Jim never feeling like he actually is a man, but always some sort of man-child prevail. But now he has to really be the role model for his son, and you can even flip it that his son is more calculated, more put together, and a better off than Jim ever was. And you can use it as, the funeral, they're preparing for the funeral, and you can do not flashbacks, but little kind of fun things where Jim has kind of these memory sets of being with his dad and what his dad taught us and the values, and just closing that chapter of life. Now, another great thing with this, what you could do is the way the last movie ended is actually have Steve be part of the gang and not a reluctant tag along, and actually show more growth in Steve's character. And he's actually come into more well-to-do with where he's at, you know. Stifler's a fun character, and it was really weird how he was coaching football in Wedding, and then we jumped to Reunion and he's like a temp. So we could show evolution. We could even bring back Cadence in a form or something, because there's a lot of disconnect from Wedding to Reunion, and there's things we could do. And Oz should be, him and Heather should be back, and he's coaching lacrosse at the high school, or coaching his son's lacrosse team. Like, that was like a setup before. I think there's a lot of great things to do with these characters, and Finch should still be with the girl whose name evades me that the last one ended. And they come to Jim's aid for the funeral, and I don't expect them all, you know, the film's kind of act in this very like couple of day scenario. I don't expect every character to be there for the whole time, but to have them come for the funeral, and then maybe some of the characters filter through the story, and it's kind of Jim's coming home, and maybe like Oz and Heather have already come home and reestablished themselves there, and we could see just the growth of life and what that looks like. That we definitely need to include as a new character is Uncle Mort, which should be Noah's younger brother. Noah never establishes the age gap between him and Mort in the first film, but there's a couple of funny lines that are talked about, and we should definitely get Mort to show up there. I haven't figured out who I'd want cast as Mort. Would be a great way to do it, and he needs to be almost I don't know, I think it'd be funny if he was kind of like a Stifler type character to them, and it's like, it could be really interesting. But I think that there's enough material, if you go back and you watch the 4 films and you stop and think the evolution of life and where you go, that you could do another film, because the story shifts and incorporates, you know, Jim's dad more and more, that focusing more on him and Jim there at the end, I think would be a great way to just kind of catch up with these characters. Because, you know, these film series for me came out when I was in high school, and then Reunion came out, you know, I was out of high school, and I was, approaching my 10 year, or right, and they make a joke in the film about being like their 12 or 13 year reunion instead of their 10, but it causes me to reflect, you know, and definitely have to get John Cho back and give him a bigger part. That would be fun too. So that's my pitch, American Funeral. Let me know what you think. Send us an email. You can just send everything Krypton Report Pod. And if you have an idea, or if you ever want to be on a future episode, just let me know.